I just want to take out your, sheet, like that page that you had in your notebook too. We just have to do this. Is this one? I'll try to figure it out. Yeah. You guys have a good weekend? Yeah. Read this. Read this. All right, so today we are going to do section 1.3, and then if you look at the board, we're gonna have a new section today, new section tomorrow, worksheets or like a practice quiz on Wednesday, and then a quiz on Thursday. One thing I can tell you about my quizzes is that they're long. So I want to say the first quiz has like 45 questions, and each question is 2 points. So it's a 90-point quiz. So my quizzes are almost more like points, or I mean, sorry, like tests. A lot of them are like 80 points, 90 points. And my tests and quizzes go into the same bin, and it's 70% of your grade. So just so you are aware. I also did grades over the weekend, so if you check your homework, if you have a 0 ever, that means I just didn't get it. Like if you turn something in and it has the problems done or partially done, the only way I would ever give you a 0 is if you turned in a page with your name on it only, or if you, I thought you were cheating. Those are the only 2 reasons. If you turn something in and did even, you know, like the first 5 problems, you're going to get a point or 2, or 3, depending on how many problems. So if you got a 0, the chances are either that you didn't turn it in or you turned something in without a name. And over the weekend when I did homework, I didn't have any no names. If you get like an 8 or a 9, that's usually either that you didn't do all the problems, or it's that you didn't show enough work. One of those 2 reasons. Okay, so just so you're aware of that. All right, so today we are going to talk about the midpoint of a segment. And I think most of you know that the midpoint of a segment would be halfway in between the 2 points, the 2 endpoints. Okay, so if M is the midpoint of AB, that would mean this would be congruent to this. And we could say segment AM is congruent to segment MB. Okay, so today we're going to be doing a lot with midpoint. Now, when we did distance, we first learned how to find distance on a number line, and then we learned how to find it on a coordinate plane. Same thing with midpoint. We're gonna first find out how to do it on a number line, then we're gonna do it on the coordinate plane. So if you are somebody like, oh, I'd rather have a formula for this, for the number line, you certainly can copy this down. The thing about the midpoint that you have to be careful of is you want to, if you're doing it on a calculator, you want to hit enter before dividing by 2. So when you're doing midpoint, and I'll just kind of show you down here as we look, if they want the midpoint between B and D, this one looks like they're counting by 3s. And in this one, you could do it in your head, right? What's the middle between 0 and 18? 9, right? But say that that we had to show our work on a formula. Let's just say that you would go 0 plus 18, you'd add those two together, and then you would divide by 2, okay? Now 0 plus 18 is just 18 over 2, and 18 divided by 2 is 9. That one though, most of you probably would just do in your head, okay? Now between A and C, here's A, here's C, okay? A is -12, C is 6, and we need to divide that by 2. What is -12 plus 6? -6. And then you're gonna put that over 2. And -6 divided by 2 is -3. Now, here's what I was saying about the calculator. You can type this into your calculator, but if you want to type it in as all one keystroke, you would go -12 plus 6, enter, and then divide by 2. Or you'd put the top in parentheses. If you typed in -12 plus 6 divided by 2, it would only divide the 6 by 2. It would not add these and then divide by 2. So if I was doing that, I would go -12 plus 6, enter, and then divide by 2. Whether it's whichever calculator I'm doing it on, wouldn't matter. Okay, so make sure you hit enter after that. Between A and D, A is here, D is here. A is -12 and D is 18. Okay. Now again, you could do this in your head. That would be fine. -12 plus 18. Do you know what that is? 6. 6 divided by 2 is 3. If it was like 5 divided by 2, you can put it as a decimal. 5 divided by 2 is 2.5. So you can get decimals here, that's fine. Or you could leave it as 5 halves, 2.5. It really wouldn't matter. But if you're gonna just type it in, you have to hit enter before you divide by 2. So the next thing is we are going to learn how to find midpoint on a coordinate plane. And this is what I want you to write on your cheat sheet for tomorrow. Or for the quiz in this, on this section. So copy that down on the chapter 1 notes that you guys have. And say on the day of the quiz, you forgot your notes, the midpoint formula on a coordinate plane is up on that top row, fourth one in. But just try to keep that note packet in your notebook, and then on the day of the quiz, you'll be able to use that on the quiz. Okay. All right, so the midpoint formula is actually exactly like what this was for the number line, except with midpoint formula, you have an X and a Y in each of these, in each of the points. Here, we only had to add 2 together, hit enter and divide by 2. But when you're doing it on a coordinate plane, you're gonna have 2 points. So you're gonna have an X and a Y and an X and a Y. So how we do this is we're going to add our 2 X's together. So we're gonna go -6 plus 1 over 2. And then we're gonna add our 2 Y's together and divide by 2. So we're gonna go 3 plus 0 divided by 2. Okay, now again, how you do this is up to you, but if you do it on a calculator, I would first want to see this. I don't want you to just type it in and give me the answer. So you at least have to give this step of work. Okay. But if you're doing it on a calculator, you'd go -6 plus 1, enter, divided by 2, and 3 plus 0 is 3 divided by 2. Okay. So otherwise, -6 plus 1 is 5 over 2. 3 plus 0 is 3 over 2. Now, those are both reduced fractions. So it's okay to leave it like that. There's nothing wrong with that. If it was like 4 over 2, you'd have to simplify it. Yeah. Yes, thank you. Thank you. If it was like -4 over 12, if you can reduce the fraction, you have to, okay? Or if you did it on your calculator, they would give you a decimal, which is okay. -5 over 2 is -2.5, and 3 over 2 is 1.5. So those are fine. You also could have wrote this as -2.5, 1.5. Okay. So if we go to this one, we're first going to add our X's again. So we're going to go 5 plus the -4 over 2, comma, and then 12 plus 8 over 2. All right, now when you do this, again, you can do it in your head. 5 plus a -4 is 1 over 2. 12 plus 8 is 20 over 2. And when you simplify that 1/2, if you wanted to write it as 0.5, that'd be fine, or leave it as a half. 20 over 2, 20 divided by 2 is 10. So basically what this means, just so you can kind of visualize what it means, if I drew my graph, which you could all, like on a quiz, if you wanted to kind of check, you could kind of think of over 5 up 12 is going to be up here. Okay. -4 up 8 is going to be over here somewhere. And we got 0.510. So you're looking at, and of course my graph isn't exact. So you're looking for, is this going to be between those two? If I connected this segment, would this be halfway between those two? And if I drew it to scale, it would be. That's what it means. All right, so this one, again, we add the X's. So we're going to go -8 plus 5 over 2 and -2 plus 1 over 2. Okay. -8 plus 5 is -3 over 2. Negative 2 plus 1 is negative 1 over 2. Are those both reduced? And by reduced, I mean like, can I divide a number into both of them? And I can't. So I can leave it like that. Or if improper fractions, you don't like them, you can change 3 halves would be negative 3 halves would be negative 1.5. Negative 1 half would be negative 0.5. Okay. So these would be your answer. Okay, so there's also something in geometry called a segment bisector. So if we just had any old segment and the midpoint was here, okay? Anything that intersected that midpoint is called a segment bisector. We're going to talk a lot this year about bisecting, means to cut in half. So if I had like a line that was a segment bisector, it would intersect my segment at its midpoint. It's going to cut it in half. I could have a ray that starts or goes through the midpoint. That would be a segment bisector. I could have a segment that goes through. Okay. Anything that goes through a segment at its midpoint is called a segment bisector. So you can even have a plane. Here's your segment here, and the midpoint is M. And notice they have a plane cutting through where M, actually this is cutting through the plane. It looks a little bit more like, but as long as it intersects that segment at the midpoint, it is called a segment bisector. Okay. So now, there are 2 types of problems that we're going to have today. The first one that I showed you back here, you have to be able to tell not only on your assignment today, but on the quiz, you have to be able to tell what you do or which way you do it. If they want the midpoint and give you the endpoints, so what that would look like is they're telling us one of these endpoints is negative 6, 3. One of them is y0. We want the midpoint. That is when you do the midpoint formula. Okay. The second thing that is going to be a kind that you're going to have today is when they give you the midpoint and you're looking for one of the endpoints. Okay. So here's what I'm going to actually draw this down here. So here's what they're telling us. If this is, let's see, find the coordinates of the missing endpoint. If B, so this is my midpoint, is the midpoint of AC. So they tell us in the directions, B is the midpoint of AC. Okay, so now A, they tell us is negative 8, 6. B is negative 5, 10, and we need to find the endpoint. Okay, back here, we knew the endpoints. We were finding the midpoint. That's when we did midpoint formula. When we know the midpoint and we're looking for either endpoint, this is where I call it the shortcut method. Okay, I could show you this 2 ways. One is you could do 2 separate little algebra equations. They're not hard to solve, and you could do it that way. Or what I usually show is I just go from the X here to the midpoint X, and I ask myself, what do I add or subtract from negative 8 to get to negative 5? What would I have to add or subtract from here to get negative 5? I'd have to, add 3. Whatever I do here, I'm going to do it again here. So what's negative 5 plus 3? Negative 2. Okay, so that's how you get your X. Then we're going to look at what do you add or subtract from 6 to get 10? You would add 4. So then you would add 4 again to that 10. You'd go 10 plus 4 is 14. This is your answer. Okay, so this is called the shortcut way, and you're going to do that whenever you're looking for an endpoint. Okay, if you wanted to write that in your notes, like if looking for an endpoint, use shortcut method. Now, again, we have the same situation, same direction. So they told us B is the midpoint between A and C. And then if we look at what points we're given, this time we're given B, which is -1, 2, and C is 3, -5. Okay. Now on this one, we're looking for this endpoint. We basically do it the same way, except we start at this end. And we ask ourselves, what do we do to 3 to get to -1? Do I add something or subtract something? To go to 3 to -1, it's getting smaller, so I have to subtract. 3 minus what gives us -1? 4. So then I have to subtract 4 again. What is -1 minus 4? -5. Okay. Then what you would do is you'd go here and you'd ask yourself, how do you get from -5 to 2? Well, it's getting bigger, so I have to add something. What would I have to add to -5 to get to a +2? 7, right? And then I would think, what is 2 plus 7? 2 plus 7 is 9. This is your answer. And if we look down at this one, again, the rules. B is the 0.13. C is the 0.6 -2. And I'm looking for A. Okay. So here's what we're going to do. We're looking for A, so I'm going to start at this end. And I ask myself, what would I add or subtract from 6 to get 1? It's getting smaller, so I have to subtract. 6 minus what would give me 1? 5. So then I'd have to go 1 minus 5. 1 minus 5 is -4. You guys all get that? Okay. Then I would look at, what do I do to a -2 to get 3? Well, going from a -2 to a +3 is getting bigger, so I have to add. -2 plus what gives me 3? 5. So then I'd have to add 5 again. So 3 plus 5 is 8. So again, when you're doing your assignment today, and especially when you do your quiz on Thursday, you have to know when to do which way. And you could maybe write this on your cheat sheet by this, say something like, use when given endpoints. Or maybe I should say, used when finding the midpoint. That would be easier. Used when finding midpoint. And then the shortcut way we use when we're looking for an endpoint. All right, then if I look at this last page here, it says find the measure of PQ if Q is the midpoint of PR. So if you guys remember last week, we did some problems. Do you remember where we said like this plus this equals the whole thing? And we set up an algebra equation, like this plus this equals this. We can't do this on this one because they don't tell us how long this segment is, okay? But think about what a midpoint is, and do you see something I could do with those two?
Set them equal.
Set them equal. A midpoint is exactly halfway, so it breaks it into two congruent parts. So if that's the midpoint, this would just equal that, and then I solve it. So I could say 9y minus 2 equals 14 plus 5y. Now what I'm going to do is bring my y's to one side, my numbers to the other side. I would bring the 5y over, so I'm going to subtract 5y. What is 9y minus 5y? 4y minus 2 equals 14. Then I bring the 2 over by adding 2. And I would get 4y equals 16. Divide by 4. And y is 4. Now, this is another thing you're going to have to be careful of on your quiz. You always want to look at what do they want. And this does not just want y, it wants the measure of PQ. And PQ is right here, and it's 9y minus 2. So PQ is 9y minus 2. So I'm going to take this 4 and put it in there. And what would I get then? What's 9 times 4 minus 2? 34, very good. So like if you did this problem on the quiz, I think I said this, that every question on the quiz is 2 points. So if you did it and you got to this point, you would get half credit. So you have to remember to look up here and make sure that you put it back. Okay. All right, one more like this. It says that find the value of x if C is the midpoint of AB. Okay, so I drew that out. AC, they're telling us right here is 4x plus 5. And from A to B right here is 78. Now there's a couple ways you could do this. There's like probably 3 ways for sure. 4 maybe. Does anyone see what you could do here? Think about what a midpoint means. So if you know this is 4x plus 5, what do you think this is? 4x plus 5. Then, are we back to what we learned last week? Could we say 4x plus 5 plus 4x plus 5 equals 78? Do you get that? Now, other kids might think, if this is 78, could you find each of these just by dividing by 2? And that would be 39. And if you saw that this would be 39 and this would be 39, then you could just set this equal to 39. So that's another way to do it. There's probably 1 or 2 more too that you could think of. But it doesn't matter which way you would do it out of those 2. I'll just do the longer way, but you certainly could say 4x plus 5 equals 39. So I'm going to say 4x plus 5 plus 4x plus 5 equals the whole 78. Then 4x plus 4x is 8x. 5 plus 5 is 10, and that equals 78. Subtract 10, and we get 8x equals 68. And then we divide by 8. 68 divided by 8 is going to give us 8.5. Okay. Now, are we done? This one just says find the value of x, so we are. It doesn't ask us to find anything else, so we're good there. Okay, so your assignment today is this. As a whole, I was really happy with how most people showed work. The only thing I ask that you change is make sure you put your first and last name. Some people just put their first name. It's just easier for me to find you in the grade book if you have both names. Boy, you guys are doing good. And please make sure to keep your phones, no phones until 5 minutes before the bell. I know.